By the end of this video, you're going to have the complete process and all of the information on how to become a great musician. Then all that'll be left is years and years of practice, and you'll be exactly where you want to be. My name is Josh Gu, and I'm taking my years of experience learning, teaching, and performing, and sharing all of my best clarinet and music tips so you can get more out of your practice, and most importantly, have fun. You can learn more about all of my many resources at QuickStartClarinet.com, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I'm really excited for this video. I put together a sort of one-page document that has all of the practice process ideas, all of my clarinet fundamental ideas, and music fundamental ideas, all sort of wrapped into one document that you can print out, hang up in your practice space, and use it to sort of improve your practice process and sort of keep you focused on the important things to be focusing on in your practice and in your sort of musical development and growth as a clarinetist. So I'm really super duper excited for this. As you could tell sort of in the beginning, I'm already introducing that caveat in the intro that this is not going to make you a great musician. By the end of this video, you won't magically be better, but this is all of the information and all of the steps to follow to become a great musician. You do have to do the work and you do have to implement this information, but I think if you really absorb the information in here, if you get the document and print it out and come back to it time and time and time again, I think this is the foolproof process to really become a great musician. And this is the process that I've followed. This is the process that I teach to my students. This is the process that all of my best teachers were describing to me. I've just sort of deduced it and organized it and put it into this really easy to follow, organized one-page document for you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and pull that up and let me explain how it works and what's going on here. So I call this the Grand Unified Theory of Music 2.0. A few years ago, I did a Grand Unified Theory of Music video, and what the Grand Unified Theory is it has to do with physics, and it's this idea that we can relate all of the laws of physics sort of together in one formula, and that's what I'm trying to do here with music. I'm trying to relate all of the process, all of the things that you can do in practice into one page, one framework, one flowchart to make that progress that you want in your clarinet and music journey. So getting started, I think it makes sense to start with the you are here, because that's where you are currently. It seems like a great place to start. And the big picture idea of what we're doing here is we're moving from where you currently are, you're currently here, and we're trying to get to the goal. And I think the goal for everybody is to play music how it goes. I think no matter what style of music you're going for, no matter what instrument you're studying or playing or working on, the goal is always to play music and make music. That's what we're here to do. We're not trying to get great at the clarinet. We're not trying to learn a specific piece or learn a specific technique. All of those things lead us to the true end goal of playing music and doing music and musicking, because that's what this is about. This is the music journey, and you're trying to be a musician. So that's the end goal. And I think it's really helpful to think in terms of where you are and where you're going, because that clarifies the in-between. So when we remember that the end goal is to play music and play music how it goes and get the music that we want out of our instrument, then it sort of informs all of the other actions we're going to take along the way. Now, this main part inside of the triangle, this is sort of your how you actually do that. This is sort of the practice triangle. This is the triangle of improvement, where once you get into the triangle, that's where you're really practicing and you're moving forward. A lot of the stuff here in the triangle has to do with deliberate practice and different practice strategies. This red line going around the outside, that's the actual process that you're going to take. And if you're familiar with my stuff before, you might be familiar with the $1 million practice process or seen that video that I've done. And that's what this red line is. This $1 million practice process is sort of the step-by-step that you do each time. And we'll get more into that as well. I just want to get the big overview for now. Then finally, we have the outside points of the triangle of clarinet and music. And those are our foundational things. The inside the triangle is kind of the process and the things to be thinking about as you're doing the process. But we also need great music fundamentals and great clarinet fundamentals as a foundation to build from. So that's what the music and clarinet parts are, and the stuff that goes with them is sort of how do we accomplish those fundamentals? What are the clarinet and music fundamentals that we're going to be developing? And they are actually outside of the triangle very intentionally. The stuff inside the triangle is kind of when you're learning a specific piece, that's what you're going for. You're going from, I don't know the piece, to I'm going to be able to play the piece, how it goes. And it's the inside the triangle stuff that you're going to work on that particular piece. However, outside of the triangle, we also need to be working on music and clarinet fundamentals so that we have that foundation to move forward. And that's why if this triangle was right side up, that would be the base of the triangle that supports that end goal. So that's the big overview of how this works. Now let's get into it a little bit more specifically, and I'm going to start with the $1 million practice process. So even though this is the end, we actually start with step 1 over here at how it goes. And that step 1 being how it goes is really important. I think it's really, really helpful to start with the end in mind. So I always recommend to my students, and this is something I work on a lot in lessons, is figuring out how the music goes before you just start throwing the clarinet at it. So often in practice, we pull out the instrument, we get a new piece, and we just start playing and just kind of figure it out as we go. Instead, I highly recommend starting with how it goes first. Listen to it, learn it, work in small chunks, audiate, all that good stuff to figure out how it goes, and then you can start working on it. And we'll talk more about how it goes and figuring out how the music goes in the music fundamental part when we get there. But step 1 in the $1 million practice process is figure out how the music goes, start with the end in mind, so right from your first time playing it, you have that end goal in mind. Then we get to try it. And this is outside the triangle of improvement and the triangle of practice, because when you're trying it the first time, you're literally just seeing what comes out of the instrument. And we'll come back to this step of trying it quite often as we enter the feedback loop. But really, the first time trying it is just, I know how I want it to go. Let's see what happens. Then we can get to step 3 where we compare. And this is where improvement happens. And this is, I think, what people often miss is they try it without an idea of how it goes. And then they try it again, and they try it again. And maybe after the 3rd or 4th time, they're like, oh yeah, there's supposed to be an F sharp there. Or, oh, look at that accent. I should probably do that accent. Or, oh, a crescendo. I should probably do that. And they're just sort of trying it and trying it and trying it. And eventually kind of refining things. But they're pretty much refining by figuring out how it goes after they've already done it many, many times. It's sort of like if you were carving a marble statue. A lot of people get their piece of marble and they just start chipping away with no idea where they're going. You have to sort of see the piece that you're going for. And sure, maybe as you go, you'll make different decisions and adjust things, and things will be different. That's totally normal and part of the process. But I don't think anybody who does any carving or sculpting or anything like that starts with just the raw material and just starts chipping away with no idea where they're going. But I think in practice, we do that a lot. So how it goes, then you try it, then you compare. And the comparison is where the improvement happens, because you have a clear idea of what you want. Then you can be really honest about yourself and say, this didn't work, this needs to be better, etc., etc. Then you can actually improve it. And it's in that improvement phase where you really make the progress. This is where all of the sort of traditional practice techniques come in, your practice rhythms, contextual interference, kind of deliberate practice, kind of the whole thing is somewhat deliberate practice, and comparison is a really important part of deliberate practice. But that improvement part is where we really utilize those different practice strategies and practice techniques that people are always talking about. But if we don't have that initial setup of this is how I want it to go and this is what's not working now, then we won't know what techniques to use to improve it. So that comparison first is super important. Then finally, the last step of the process is to perform. And it doesn't have to be a full performance of the whole piece in front of people. It can be on a very small chunk as well. So that's the overview of the $1 million practice process. And that's the actual what you're going to be doing. Those are the steps that you take every single time you say, okay, I'm going to learn this new piece of music that I have. I'm going to identify a small chunk, figure out how the music goes, try it, compare what did I do compared to how I want it to go, then improve it and make those improvements that you're noticing in the comparison. And then once you feel like you've got it where you want it, then you perform it. Now the other stuff in the triangle is kind of what to be thinking about and what to be focusing on as you're doing those actual steps of the $1 million practice process. So the first one that we have with the 4 opportunities for improvement, that happens as you're comparing things. When it comes to comparison, a lot of people will struggle and say, well, I know that that wasn't how I wanted it to go. I didn't sound like the professional, but I don't know what needed to be improved. And that's where those 4 opportunities for improvement can sort of help narrow those things in. So the 4 opportunities are rhythm, sound quality, notes, and style. And the way you use those is use them as sort of lenses to filter what you just played. So say I am working on 4 measures or 8 measures of the piece. I'm really clear on how the music goes. I've listened to professional recordings. I've audiated it. I know what I want. I try playing it and it's not quite what I want. I'll ask myself, well, how was my rhythm? Was the rhythm really accurate? Did I have it connected to the steady beat? Was I able to count it all confidently? Yes, no, maybe. I'll find opportunities there. Number 2, how was the sound? Was I in control of the sound? Was the sound the right character? Was the connections between the notes? Did I connect the notes really well? How is the sound? Find more opportunities there. Notes. Did I play all the right notes? Great. Was I confident and in control as I was playing those notes? Were my fingers relaxed as I was playing those notes? Were the notes in tune and with a nice intonation that I would want for the context of the notes? Great, find more opportunities. And last is style, which is sort of a catch-all of everything else. Was the tempo what I wanted? Were the dynamics what I wanted? Was the articulation what I wanted? And it's totally fine to be doing things under tempo as you're starting to learn it. Don't be like, well, it's still half tempo, so I guess that's a big, huge opportunity for improvement. And yeah, it is an opportunity for improvement to get it up to tempo. But we want to get all of the things really, really good first before we start moving the tempo up. But as you're asking those style questions, you can again find more opportunities for improvement. And those opportunities for improvement are the identify step of the 3 I's of practice. So once we've identified those opportunities, pick 1 or maybe 2 and start working on them. So you've identified those things that you want to improve, those opportunities. Now we go into the 3 I's, and the next step after identifying is to isolate and improve. So say it was the rhythm on this one beat in this one measure. I'm going to isolate just that beat, make sure that I can really get it, improve it, do whatever rhythm counting. And again, we're on this sort of improving stage, which is where we pull out all the practice techniques. So if it's a rhythm issue, I could count it with method 1 of rhythm counting. I could count it then with method 2. I could do it with the metronome. I can do it again, counting on its own removes the issues of the instrument, so that's a way to isolate and improve further. I could slow it down, then I can start building it back up, which we'll talk about in a second. When it comes to isolating and improving, I think the most important thing is that you're simplifying. You have to simplify it until you can get it. A lot of people will fall into the mistake of they do a good job of actually comparing and they've identified the problem area, but when they go to improve it, they just do it over and over and over and over and over, and it's that classic quote about the definition of insanity where you're doing the same thing and expecting different results. When it comes to the improvement phase, you have to do things differently, you have to simplify, you have to approach it from a different angle in your brain and the way you're thinking about it so that you can actually make an improvement. So simplifying is super important at that isolating and improving stage. Then we can start to integrate. And integrating has sort of two phases to it, actually. One is where we build it back up. So if you're, say, working on a 16th note run that's 1 or 2 beats long, and you've slowed it down to where you can confidently and comfortably play it, you've maybe analyzed it a little bit, noticed some note patterns, you've worked on some specific finger issues where your fingers were getting a little tense or feeling a little uncomfortable. You did dotted rhythms on it and practice rhythms. You did grouping things, snappy finger exercise, whatever techniques you're using to simplify it and improve it. Then the first step of integrating is maybe to get rid of the dotted rhythms and play it in time and with even rhythms as written. Then maybe gradually speed that up until it's the same tempo as the stuff around it, or at least close to that. Then the other side of integration is to actually put it in the context of the music. So often we'll work on a little bit and isolate and improve it, and we get it when it's just a little bit, and then when we're having to think about the stuff getting into it and the stuff getting out of it, then it falls apart. So gradually integrating it where you do, okay, those 2 beats of 16th notes, I got those. Now I'm gonna add the 1 beat before, and then the 1 beat after, and then the measure before and the measure after, and then eventually you can do it in the full 8-bar phrase or 4 measures that you're working on, or whatever it may be. And then when you go to integrate it and you put it back together, you'll find another opportunity for improvement. And this is what the feedback loop is all about, is that we're continuously finding new opportunities and improving them and integrating them, and finding new opportunities and improving them and integrating them. And that's what practice is all about, is really living in that feedback loop of comparison and improvement, finding opportunities for improvement, making those improvements, and ironing out all of the kinks and really getting a hang of it. As you're in that feedback loop, recording is going to be one of your most useful tools. Recording I find the most helpful when I'm at the point where I'm no longer obviously finding opportunities for improvement. So if you play through it and you think, you know, that was pretty good, I'm pretty happy with that, I might accept that in a performance. First of all, that's great. Maybe you can just move on from it if you really feel good about it. But if you're looking for more opportunities to improve, recording is super helpful, because when you're recording yourself, first of all, you have a little performance pressure to perform for the recording. And then when you listen back to the recording, you're not distracted by actually having to play the music as well and play the clarinet. You can have that listener perspective and be fully focused on reflecting and observing on how you're actually doing. I always find more opportunities for improvement when I record something, and I think you'll find, especially if you've never recorded yourself before, you'll find a lot of opportunities for improvement the first listen through, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. That's the point of practicing, is to find more opportunities and then actually improve them. So that's that sort of feedback loop with the 4 opportunities and the 3 I's. The 3 C's of practice, these are also extremely important and kind of what we should be looking for as we're isolating and improving, especially in that improvement phase and the simplification phase. We want to simplify so that it's definitely correct. Like, the first thing we need to get is that it's actually correct. If you've identified, oh, I'm playing a wrong rhythm here and I'm not super confident with the notes on this beat, then as you're isolating and improving that, you want to make sure it's correct. And again, knowing how the music goes in the first place is going to make it so much easier to know if it's correct or not. If you find yourself playing a bit of music and thinking, I think that's right, it felt pretty close, it's probably not correct, and you probably don't know what correct is well enough, and you need to put the instrument aside and figure out the music. Count the rhythm if you need to, do whatever it takes to actually know for sure that that is correct. Then once you know that you're actually getting it correct, the next thing to do is make sure that it's comfortable / confident / in control. There's a whole lot of different options here for how to think of it, but it needs to feel like you're the one making it come out correctly. If you're feeling like, oh wow, I did it right, like I feel like I got lucky and it actually came out the way that it's supposed to come out and was actually correct, like wow, I wasn't expecting that, then you're just getting lucky and you're not going to be able to do that consistently. And that's the ultimate goal of simplifying and improving, and the thing that we're trying to integrate is getting it consistently correct. So you have to make sure that it's comfortable, make sure that it's confident, make sure that you're in control of making it come out correct. That is what will lead to consistency. So that's the 3 C's of practice. As you're simplifying, isolating, improving, those are the things that should be top of mind. And that's really where I think the improvement really comes from, is when you obviously are getting it correct, but not just getting lucky getting it correct, you're actually in control of making it happen correctly, consistently, and then you'll feel comfortable and confident about it as you continue to work through it. And then last but not least in our process here is performance mode. And like I said, it doesn't have to be performing the whole piece in front of an audience. It can very simply be performing 4 measures for a recording device, for yourself. It doesn't have to be truly playing in front of an audience at all, but we do need to practice performance mode and practice performing, because performing is a different skill than practicing. Throughout the whole triangle so far and the whole $1 million practice process, we've been in what I call practice mode, where we're really being quite critical and really aware. Maybe aware is better than critical, but we're being extremely aware of what is going well, what needs to be improved, and always trying to find opportunities for improvement, and always trying to be correct and comfortable and in control of getting it to come out correct and consistent. When we switch over to performance mode, we have to have a little bit of a different mindset. In performance mode, you have to be fully in the moment. It doesn't matter what happens. You just have to get on to the next thing, and you could have a massive squeak, wrong note, terrible rhythm in one moment, and in the next moment you have to forget all of that and be back in the zone, back focused, making your best sound on the very next note. And that's a completely different skill that we have to practice. It's also a skill to practice mode, to be aware of those mistakes and be able to play while also noticing the things that are happening and being able to remember those opportunities for improvement to come back and work on. Performance mode's the same way, where we have to practice and improve at being in the moment, moving from note to note, and basically forgetting what's happened. Because there's nothing worse in a performance. I've experienced this firsthand many times, where you're playing something and thinking, oh, this is going well and sounds good, but I squeaked like half a page ago, and everybody's going to be remembering that squeak, and that's all that I'm thinking about now. And then you make another mistake because that's all that you're thinking about. Nobody's going to remember the squeak. They might remember like a squeak, but they're not going to be thinking that in the moment as they're listening. In the moment, you have to be focused on what you're actively doing, and that's what performance mode is for practicing. One other thing I would add when it comes to performance mode is I might suggest doing this for a recording pretty regularly. The performance mode is something you'll do towards the end of learning a chunk of music. So you should be pretty polished. It's maybe not totally performance ready. It definitely doesn't have to be at performance tempo if it's a faster piece, but it should be relatively polished and close to what you're wanting. So recording yourself there will be helpful to sort of track your progress over time and find more opportunities for improvement. But the other beauty of recording is it relieves that pressure of trying to remember what went wrong and what went well in real time. You can just leave that up to the recording device and again be even more in the moment and focused on how it's going moment to moment. And that gets you pretty close to the end goal of playing the music how it goes. Is once you're in that performance mode, then you're actually executing how you want the music to go. Then you just have to piece it together and do the entire piece in performance mode. But doing little chunks at a time will be immensely beneficial for building that up. So that's the $1 million practice process and what to be thinking about as you're doing the $1 million practice process. Now, let's talk a little bit about the music fundamentals and the clarinet fundamentals. So starting off with the music fundamentals, when it comes to music, this is obvious, hopefully now, how important it is to have really strong music fundamentals, because that's the very first step of the process, right? You must know how it goes, and you must know how the music goes to know if you're doing it correct in the 3 C's, to know what opportunities there are for improvement, because if you don't know how it goes, you might just play it and say like, yeah, I played something, that must have been good. So we need to know how the music goes, and that's where the music fundamentals come in. When it comes to music, I think there's sort of this triangle with the rhythm, notes, and style. I think those are really the components of music, and those are the components that you need to be familiar with and comfortable with. So counting your rhythms, putting the rhythms with a steady beat, knowing what the notes are, and the more advanced you get with music theory, you can recognize scale patterns, you can recognize arpeggio patterns, you might start to recognize chords and harmonies and see how that's sort of fitting together and influencing the music. You don't have to know those things, but those are all things that are going to improve your musical ability and improve how music goes and improve your music fundamentals so that you can maximize this process of improvement within the triangle and in the $1 million practice process even better. Then there's style, which again is the sort of catch-all for tempo, dynamics, articulation, all of that good stuff that creates the right style to the notes so it doesn't sound just like a computer playing it, but actually sounds like a human making music. And the end goal of all of those things is character and expression. I think that's what I'm usually looking for in a good performance of myself or when I'm listening to somebody else play is character and expression. I've heard some performances, live in-person performances, that were so perfect, like just incredibly perfect by really great players, but I felt like they didn't have a lot of character and expression. Like they were almost too perfect, so they weren't very interesting. Whereas the live performances that have really stuck with me and are really memorable are just filled with character and expression. It's like the person playing is not just playing a perfect rendition of the piece or playing the clarinet perfectly, but they're doing both of those things really well while conveying an emotion or a story or a character or expressing something that they themselves want to express and bring to the music. And those are the performances that have had such a bigger impact on me personally. So in my music making, I'm sort of always having that as an end goal, is character and expression, asking myself, what is the character of the music that I'm going for now? What am I trying to express with the music in this moment? And I think the key to making the character and expression come out comes from connection and intention. Intention is the intent of the character or the expression or the emotion. Like, what am I trying to convey? Is it happy? Is it sad? Is it energetic? What is my intention? And then the way that the intention comes from me to the actual audience is through the connection of things. So how am I connecting between the notes? How am I connecting the dynamics? How am I connecting the articulations? Or even disconnecting if it's a staccato or separated. But even in that separation, what is the connection? Is the connection that it is just truly very dry, very crisp, very separate? or is it sort of bouncing along towards something? Having that kind of connection and intention and idea behind the musicality is what leads to character and expression, and having the rhythm, notes, and style accurate and what you want and connecting with intention through the rhythm, notes, and style again leads back to that character and expression. Under connection and intention, I also put a few other things that are just generally good music things to be working on, and this is kind of how you develop that connection and intention and lead to the character and expression. So we have listening. Listening to music is sometimes, I think, underrated when it comes to learning music. I think it's something that all musicians should be doing just about as much as they possibly can, because music is an oral thing. It's something that we hear. It comes from the ear and comes to the ear. It's not something on the page. We all really work on our analysis and really work on, oh, I really need to figure out how to count these rhythms, but we sometimes skip the stage of actually hearing it. And that's what we're doing, is pulling the music off the page and turning it into sound. So don't overestimate the importance, or don't underestimate the importance of actually listening to music and hearing the music so that you can turn the ink on the page into sound as well. That being said, analysis is also good. Analysis is something that will help inform how you're turning the ink on the page into sound, and the clearer you can be about the analysis of things, the better. The more deep you know the music, the more connection and intention and character and expression you can bring to it. The next one is groupings. Groupings are this idea of how the notes and rhythms group together. Groupings are really interesting. I sort of relate this to language, where if you play with no groupings, again, you're going to sound like a computer, and you also kind of sound like a young child trying to sound out words. So they're sort of doing that like and unified. That's kind of what it sounds like when you play without groupings. Whereas when you have groupings and you know how the notes are connecting together and see the slightly bigger picture of the meaning to the music and where the music's going, then you start to sound like grand unified theory, and you start to put the individual pieces together into words and together into phrases. It's not a coincidence that phrases is a word that applies to both music and language, because that's exactly what we're doing in the music. When we put together a phrase or when we play a phrase, is we're making a complete sentence. We start with an idea, we go somewhere with that idea, and then we resolve. The end of a phrase is typically defined by coming to a cadence, and a cadence is like a musical punctuation mark. And that punctuation mark is what creates the sort of conclusion to the large grouping of the phrase. And then you can also see micro groupings and groupings on a more micro scale. Like if you have something like bum, that feels like a grouping because it goes together. Bum. You can tell we're have sort of tension. Bum, and then we resolve. And that's what a grouping is a moment of tension to release, a moment of leading to landing. You could have even a very simple rhythmic grouping in an upbeat going to a downbeat. Bum, lead, land. We have that leading tension, especially with the notes that I'm using, where that's sort of the dominant. Bum, resolve, land. So that's what groupings are. You can see them on micro scales all the way up to macro scales of a phrase, probably even a really big macro scale of the whole piece. I don't think you have to worry too much about the macro phrase grouping of the entire piece of when you're first learning it, but that is possible, and that's what groupings are about. So that's groupings, and then the last thing is audiation. Audiation is a super important music fundamental, which is where it all comes together into your head and into your inner ear. And audiation is really what we're going for when we start the $1 Million practice process of how the music goes. Audiation is when you're able to clearly hear, how does this piece go, what's going on in the music, And it's great because it doesn't involve the instrument. The instrument brings all of its own baggage, which we're going to talk about in a second. So you can really wrestle with things when you're trying to do it on the instrument. When you're audiating, it's just your inner ear, how you're hearing the music. You look at the music on the page, you take the knowledge you have from listening to the piece, you do your analysis, you find those groupings, and then you hear as clearly as you can a perfect performance of the piece. And you can include the sound quality of your instrument in that, of course, but hearing as close as you can to like exactly how the music goes, realizing the ink on the page into sound in your head. And the better you get at that, the easier it is to pull that out and put it into the instrument. So that's music fundamentals. The end goal is character and expression. Their connection and intention, rhythm, notes, and style, those are what fuel that character and intention. Those are the fundamentals to make that happen. Listening, analysis, groupings, and audiation are more fundamentals that sort of really support the connection and intention. So that's music. Then we move over to the other foundational part of the triangle, which is the clarinet. And for me, clarinet playing and the fundamentals of the clarinet are grouped into sound quality, finger motion, and articulation. Those are the big key things. Those are the important components of playing the clarinet. If you think about it, music can get really complicated, super crazy rhythms, all kinds of dynamics happening, accents, staccato, the dynamics, like all the stuff in music. But no matter how complicated the music gets, the clarinet only needs to do those three things of sound good, including the volume that it's supposed to be at, move the fingers to the right note at the right time, and articulate. Shape the notes however they're supposed to be shaped with the tongue. That's it. Those are the only three parts of playing the clarinet that we ever need, no matter how complicated the music gets. Now, when it comes to those three things, it can be a little tricky and there's some depth there to get the hang of them. When it comes to sound quality, I like to think of this how to play clarinet triangle with air, embouchure, and voicing. In my how to play clarinet triangle, when I was first sort of coming up with that idea, I used tongue instead of voicing, but I think there's a little bit more to it, that it's not just tongue position, but it's also the openness of the throat, the soft palate, and some other components there too. So voicing kind of captures all of those things. And the end goal of all of those is great reed vibrations. That's what good sound is good reed vibrations and good resonance of the air through the instrument, through those good reed vibrations. So with the air, with the embouchure, with the voicing, my goal for all of those things is to work with the reed and maximize the energy of the reed, with the end goal being clarity and fullness. What I mean by this is a clear sound versus a fuzzy sound. If the sound is fuzzy, it's probably because the reed vibrations are being dampened, or maybe there's not enough energy from the air to get good reed vibrations. Fullness is fullness versus thinness, being the opposite of that. If the sound is thin, then the reed vibrations are probably being pinched off. And sometimes those are kind of contradictory to each other, clarity and fullness. You can have a really clear but thin sound. You can have a really full but fuzzy sound. So we have to find that sweet spot where, again, we're in equilibrium and balancing with the reed and working with the reed to maximize the most clear, full reed vibrations and resonance through the instrument. Then there's the finger motion. For finger motion, I think it's important to have prim and proper fingers. So prim is the acronym for precise, relaxed, independent, and minimal. Precise meaning precise coordination. So if you're moving two fingers, they both move at exactly the same time. Even if you're moving one finger, it's not like really mushy, but very precise and nice and snappy. Relaxed is relaxed hand position, relaxed finger position, making sure that they can wiggle in a nice and relaxed way. Independent is that when I move one finger, only that finger moves, and I'm not moving my whole hand to make it happen. That's really important on the pinky keys as you're moving that pinky around to minimize the ring finger motion. And also really important on the throat tones when you're hitting the G sharp and the A, that you're not having to move the whole hand. It's just independent first finger motion, or at least as independent as possible. And then the last one is minimal motion, meaning that you're staying nice and close to the keys and not moving too much. And that's prim and proper finger motion for playing the clarinet, and pretty much all instruments where you have to move your fingers. Last up for clarinet sound quality is the articulation. And I think the most important part for the articulation is independent motion, making sure that you're independently moving just the tip of the tongue, not the whole tongue. As the tip of the tongue moves, the embouchure doesn't move, the air support doesn't move. Even when the sound stops and we're no longer hearing sound, the air is still steady and strong and supported, making sure the throat doesn't change, the soft palate doesn't change. All of the voicing, embouchure, air, all of those clarinet sound quality things are maintaining as we move the tip of the tongue to the tip of the reed to pause the reed vibrations. It's not fully stopping them. We don't stop them and then have to restart them. We're pausing the reed vibrations with the tongue and then taking the tongue off, releasing the tongue, and letting those vibrations resume. It's not interrupting the air. The air keeps going. It's not totally stopping the sound. Yes, the sound does stop if you're doing like staccato with space in between, but it's the reed really that we're just pausing those vibrations of the reed while maintaining everything else. When it comes to articulation, it's super important to maintain the sound, maintain good sound quality, and move just the tip of the tongue. So you can move the tip of the tongue as much as it needs to get to the tip of the reed, but don't let it be the front middle of the tongue, the middle, the back middle, the back. Don't let any of those other parts of the tongue move. Just the tip of the tongue moving independently to the reed. And last but not least, in our clarinet fundamentals, we have the 3-step warm-up. The 3-step warm-up is to work on these things. So long tones focus on sound quality, technique focuses on finger motion, and of course articulation focuses on articulation. The 3-step warm-up is something that I do all the time. Every time I play, the very first thing that I do is dial these 3 things in. Make sure that I'm getting my sound by just playing some long notes, focusing on the quality of sound. Then I get my fingers wiggling by playing some scales, some scale patterns, some arpeggios, things like that to make sure my fingers are wiggling effectively and wiggling where they need to be and they're prim and proper finger motion. And then I do some articulation to make sure I'm comfortable moving just the tip of the tongue to pause the vibrations of the reed and release off back to really good sound quality. So that is the Grand Unified Theory of Music 2.0. If you want to download this and have it so that you can print it off, have it in your practice space, go to quickstartclarinet.com/getstarted. There it is in the free members area. So you just go there, create a login, you'll get a password emailed to you, and it'll be the very first one you see in the free downloads. So also if you already have a free members area account, maybe because you did it for the Monday Music Motivation practice templates, you got my reformatted close scales in there or something like that in the past, when you go to quickstartclarinet.com/getstarted, in the top right, you'll see a button to log in. And then you can log in with your email and password, and again find the free members area, the free downloads, and this one will be now the very first one that shows up there. There's a bunch of other ones there as well, including the Grand Unified Theory of Music 1.0 that I did a couple of years ago if you want to explore this further. But you can go there and get this to print out. The other cool thing about this, on the second page, is an explanation of everything. So you don't have to come to this video and like scrub through to find what you're looking for. You can read about it on the second page, print this double-sided, and it'll be right there for you. Not as easy if you're printing it, but these are also links. So any of these items that are underlined will link to a separate video where I talk about that specific thing. So I have a video on like the 3 eyes of practice, which was actually one of my first videos I did on the YouTube channel many years ago now. You can watch that specific video on that specific topic. If it's underlined, then it has a link to it. And that's the grand unified theory of music. I want to add one more thing as you're starting to get into this and work through this process. If this kind of discussion was really interesting to you, then I also encourage you to go to quickstartclarinet.com/test drive, where you can test drive the next generation clarinet method. That is kind of similar to this. This is like all of my teaching philosophies, all of my frameworks sort of rolled into one grand unified theory. The test drive has also a lot of my core teaching philosophies, a lot of similar stuff to this, like we go over the 3-step warm-up and how to play the clarinet and the how to play music triangle and things like that, but it'll go a little bit more in depth and make it really actionable. So if you want to get started actually putting this into use, the test drive would be a great way to learn more about the specific topics and go more in depth and actually start working on them in your playing with some specific sort of practice assignments and things like that I give in there to help implement this. So thanks so much for watching. I know this was a little bit longer video, but hopefully you can see how everything really comes together. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this process. Let me know in the comments if there's anything that needs to be added to this to make it more complete, but I think there's a lot of stuff there to be working on. I really encourage you to get the handout, quickstartclarinet.com/get-started, and actually print it out and actually start using it. Because like I said at the very beginning, you can have all of this information, like this is all of the information. You want to know how to play the clarinet? This is it. This is how you become a great musician. This is how you become a great clarinetist. But you also have to do the work now. This is the what and the how and the why, but now you need to actually put it into practice and make it automatic in your playing, and then you will be great and you'll get to your goal and you go from where you are to where you want to be. So thanks so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in another video. And last but not least, a huge heartfelt thank you to the Dennersons. This is like the QuickStart Clarinet family who supports the channel and helps to make everything that I do possible. If you would like to support the channel and get some awesome rewards in return where we can work one-on-one over video and you can have my full support moving forward on your clarinet journey, then go to quickstartclarinet.com/supporter.